Hello chameleon wranglers, welcome to the Chameleon Hour. Today's main event is a visit by Dr. Rachel Su, who is well known on TikTok and Instagram as Exotic Pet Vet. Dr. Rachel is going to be sharing with us some insight into the paper that she published on the parasites found in captive reptiles. And the takeaway from that is something we all need to listen to. This is Bill Strand, and it's time for the Chameleon Hour. Let's start off with a couple of news segments. First of all, does the name Jurgen van Overbeek mean anything to you? He's a breeder out of Belgium, and he works with a number of very rare species. Well, we've got some good news from Jurgen, and he is hatching out Furcifer balteatus. Now, many people aren't familiar with Furcifer balteatus because it's a rarely kept species. Those of you who do know what this chameleon is, you know what an amazing species it is. And I asked Jurgen if he would introduce us to the father of the babies he is now raising.
Hello everybody, this is Jurgen from Belgium, and I want to show you a little movie about rarely kept species in Europe. This is my Furcifer balteatus male, who is currently shedding, and he's also enjoying one of the last sun rays before the fall is coming. I currently also have a lot of babies, and later on I will make a little film about these two. This is actually my breeding male. He's around 5-6 years old, and he already produced a lot of beautiful babies. Really beautiful animal.
I have seen Furcifer balteatus in person, and I'm excited to know that it's being bred in captivity. Now, let's get an audience question. This question comes from Mikey, also known as Medushi Reptiles. Mikey, what question do you have for us?
Hey Bill, it's Mikey here, aka Medushi Reptiles, with a question for you. How can you tell if your chameleon is overweight?
Obesity is a significant problem in captive populations of chameleons, and it comes from love. We would never let our beloved chameleons go hungry. But this well-intentioned action can have disastrous effects, especially in females that can develop clutches of eggs so large that they have trouble laying them, and they can become egg-bound and die. Unhealthy weight can also make it difficult for your chameleon to do the normal everyday chameleon things like crawl on branches or just navigate through the branch maze in their cage. So here's an example of an obese Jackson's chameleon that had challenges just staying on her branch. In addition, she's also developing gout, which makes grip painful. But this is not what a chameleon should look like. Panthers and Veileds have large fleshy pads, so are very easy to tell. Jacksons and other chameleons aren't so obvious, and so we have to take into account other aspects like how aggressively and gracefully they can navigate their branches. Jacksons can also be deceptive because they may look like they are gravid, but in reality, they're just fat. Long ago, I had a Jackson's that just would never have her babies, and x-rays showed that she just had huge fat pads. So let's take a look at some examples. This here is what a good, healthy cask in Panthers and Veileds should look like. You notice how the cask is not bulging. It's just a nice kind of a flat, maybe just a little bit of a bulge. But this is what underweight would look like. And you notice how it's just like concave. It's like it sinks in. And this is what overweight would look like. And so you see how it starts to bulge to just becoming very obviously bulging. And so you can see how in Panthers and Veileds, at least, the bulging or the receding of the cask tissue is a very good indicator of their weight. Now, for other species where it may not be so totally obvious as to what their fat level should be and what it should look like, Google and find some pictures of this chameleon species in the wild. I've never seen an obese chameleon in the wild, so you can get a feel for what their body should look like. Now, obviously, not all wild chameleons are healthy, but if you get enough of them together, you can start putting together a general average and get a feel for what that chameleon should look like. And here is where having a large cage is best. Chameleons are foragers, and so they will go throughout the entire cage looking to see where food might be. Now, if they're given perfect conditions, perfect basking, perfect sleeping spot, and food right there, they don't have need to go anywhere. But you need to watch them move. They should be effortlessly and gracefully navigating the maze of branches in their cage. They should look powerful and agile. If your chameleon appears sluggish or doesn't want to move, and when they crawl on the branch, they seem like they're having troubles keeping their balance, or maybe they slip, they fall, this is a sign that there's a weight problem on your chameleon. Any chameleon can get overweight, but we have to make special mention of the veiled chameleon. And this is Clancy, and he is going to help me discuss his species. Veiled chameleons are an interesting sort because they supercharge, and especially the females will grow and produce clutches that are so big that it's unhealthy for them. Veiled chameleon clutches were wanting 20 to 30 eggs, but with the combination of all the food they can eat and conditions that are too warm, the body just goes crazy and will produce clutches about 60 eggs or even over 100 eggs. This is a very unhealthy situation for the female and will definitely shorten her life, if not kill her. The problem is that there are some fat pads on either side of the oviducts, and if they get so big that the eggs can't pass through, you get into an egg binding situation which could be deadly. The crazy thing is that this situation has become so common in veiled chameleons and so accepted by the community that vets even have proactive spaying to save the life of the female before she even gets gravid. But this condition could be solved by simply offering proper husbandry. And of course, the main question on the table today is, how do we prevent this from happening in the first place? Luckily, that's actually easy. By maintaining reasonable temperatures and a reasonable diet, we can keep chameleons from getting obese. Even veiled chameleon females who, I admit, it's very hard to keep them from producing infertile clutches of eggs, but we can limit the number of times they do that and how many eggs they have in those infertile clutches. How do we do this? Well, we keep a basking temperature at a reasonable 85 degrees Fahrenheit. They really don't need more than that. That at least is a good starting point. Start your chameleon off at 85 degrees Fahrenheit and you can up it if they need it. Of course, different species is going to require different temperatures. Veileds, Panthers, Jacksons, they do well at 85. And then next is the diet. Yes, when they're babies, we want to feed them as much food as they will eat and offer it at all times. And the reason is because babies are going to go through growth spurts. And we want to make sure that when they're going through a growth spurt, they have all the food they need to fuel that growth. But when they get to be an adult, we want to stop that food being available at all times because instead of growing longer, they're starting to grow in girth. And so the obvious question is, how do you know when your chameleons reach the adult stage and you need to pull back on the food? And the answer is not easy because every individual chameleon is going to grow at a different rate. Luckily, there's a large margin for error and you don't have to stress about that exact point. Just observe your chameleon and you will get a feel for how they're doing. You'll get a feel for how when they stop growing longer and start growing in girth. And if you've got a veiled or a panther, you can always look at the cask. And really, all this takes is for you to be observant. As soon as you start noticing it going in the wrong direction, you can pull back on the food. It's really as simple as that, and just come back to the adult diet of about 3 to 5 appropriately sized feeders every other day. And that is enough for just about every species of chameleon. More and more, we're considering healthy longevity to be the measure of success in chameleon husbandry. Now, I acknowledge that's very hard to measure because it takes a decade or so. But we are working hard now for the sake of future generations of chameleons and their keepers. And I invite you to come along with me on this channel as we tease out the secrets of optimal chameleon husbandry in real time. Next, I'd like to share something that Richard Stewart from the Tarantula Collective is doing on his channel. The Tarantula Collective is a YouTube channel that serves the tarantula community, and Richard produces high-quality documentary-style videos. I really love when people in the reptile community do something that's good for the general community, and I want to support this, so I'm going to be donating my last copy of Mountain Dragons by Jan Stapala. But I'd like to bring Richard on here so he can explain what he's doing in his own words, and if you'd like to do something good this October, this would be a place to do it. Hello, Richard. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Bill.
All right, so you have done this charity. You call it a giveaway. You've done this. This is the fourth year, right?
That's correct, yes. Fourth year, the fourth annual Halloween fundraiser giveaway.
All right, go ahead. Start from the beginning. What is the Harmony House? What do they do?
Sure.
And how does this giveaway work?
Well, Harmony House it's actually a name. I mean, if you look, like I grew up in a different town than where I'm living now, and there was a Harmony House there, but they're not affiliated. So there's a lot of organizations out there called Harmony House. This one is particularly in my area. What they do is they are a children's advocacy center. So they work with children that have been sexually or physically abused, neglected, and they have the therapists there and the social workers that will sit down and talk to them, make them comfortable. There's, toys and games and stuff to play, and they can draw, and they get a bunch of kids' stuff there. So they get comfortable, and then they start asking them some questions, just kind of like move in and just trying to find out, if they've been abused, how they've been abused. Then afterwards, they provide just therapy and stuff like that to kind of help them overcome these traumatic experiences. Like normally I'm kind of hesitant to support organizations, charities, and because I know a lot of them, like 10% of the money that they raise actually goes to the charity, and then the rest of it goes to paying for advertisements for TV. But I know these people, like personally, some of them are my friends, people I hang out with, people that I've known for many years, and I have a very intimate knowledge of their organization. So I know that every dollar that they're getting goes right into that organization to kind of help perpetuate the work that they're doing, which is why I'm like such a proponent of trying to, raise some money for them.
Excellent. So tell us about this giveaway. How can we be part of this?
Well, it's really cool because we've got a whole bunch of, every year it grows. Like I think the first year we raised like $1,000, and then the second year was like maybe 3,000 or 4,000. Last year was almost 8,000, and this year's goal is 10,000. But we're like already halfway there. So and there's two things going on this year. One is a Tarantula Auction. So Nate over at Micro Wilderness, which is a tarantula dealer out in Los Angeles, donated some spiders pretty much that we put on this website called Rally Up, which is a fundraising website for nonprofits, and you can go and bid on the tarantulas there, and he'll ship them directly to you. I think we've already raised over $1,000 during that, and that goes until October 14th. And then the main giveaway, which is this thing I do every year, is I made a video that explains pretty much all of it in detail. But essentially all you do is, in the video, there's a link to a GoFundMe for the Harmony House. And you can go in there, you can donate as little as $5. And then at the end of the month, usually around Halloween, not on Halloween because that's usually a pretty busy day, but a couple days before Halloween, I'll do a live stream on my channel, and we'll go through all the people that left donations, and we'll just start drawing random winners. And we've got a whole bunch of prizes.
All right, well, I'm going to have the link to that GoFundMe in the description. And best of luck to everybody. Go ahead and go over and support the Harmony House. Richard, it's great that you're doing this, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Well, thank you so much for your support and for helping me get the word out. That means a lot.
Richard is a fellow YouTuber, podcaster, and influencer, and has been very supportive of the Chameleon Academy, and so I'd like to return the favor. It's a great charity, and links to get involved are in the description. Okay, now I'd like to bring on a question from Gabriel.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Negrich, and I know that female panther chameleons can lay more than one clutch of eggs at a time from a single mating, but I was just wondering how many exactly.
So Gabriel is referring to the well-known fact that female chameleons can produce multiple clutches of eggs from one mating. And this happens with many species of chameleons. But to answer Gabriel's question, I thought I'd go to an expert in panther chameleons. And so I asked Jonathan Hill of iPardalis how many clutches of eggs he gets from his panther chameleon females from one mating.
It's a really good question. It's one where the average, in my experience, is around two to three. But I did have one female that gave me 5. And at the 5th one, on the 4th one, I had already been like, this is the last ever. never. And I advertised them that way, and then she made me a liar because the fifth one hatched, and so I had to advertise those, and everyone was like, "Wasn't the last one the last one?" I was like, "Yeah, well, I think this one really is the last one." And so that was over a year after she'd been bred, and it was I was trying to retire her, and she continued to lay, and she gave me 5 at the end of her time, and that was Alla, if anybody's familiar with my project. But Alla gave me more clutches than any female I've ever worked with, and she was an outlier in many ways, but she also helped prove that kind of upward bound that at least I've experienced of 5 successive clutches. And so if anybody had worked with Alla that wasn't myself and had bred her with another male at the after the second clutch, for example, that's where it gets really interesting. Because there was a a post about somebody saying that the second male will kill all the sperm of the first male, and I was like, I don't know about that. I think that's a interesting theory, but you gotta test it. You gotta have an example to try to explain why that would happen. Because I think the best baseline assumption is that both would end up fertilizing eggs. You know, she'd store sperm from the first male, second male comes in, and there'd be a mix. But that would be that's another thing that I think we should try to experiment with and learn about. One thing that's cool about the genetics test that's coming out is we actually could just get sheds from all the babies after a female's been bred to 2 males and use the test to determine if they're like what the mix is. But my assumption is that you're going to get a mix from both sires.
Thank you, Jonathan. Very good to see you here again. Now, the next segment is a little bit difficult for me because it's something that I'm personally involved with, and it's ongoing right now. And that is the danger of spiders, especially if you're working with baby chameleons, smaller species of chameleons, and bioactive environments. This is something you're going to have to listen to. Today I want to talk about spiders. Chameleons can eat spiders, and they will try, but spiders can also bite, and that can be dangerous for chameleons. I want to share an experience I just had, and we're actually still in the middle of it. I came out a week ago to check on Emily, who's my jeweled chameleon, my Furcifer Campani, captive hatch from Michael Nash, and many of you have been watching her grow up here on social media. But when I checked on her, I saw something that was horrifying. She was black, splotchy, and looked really bad. Whenever you see big black spotches or sickly yellow, that is an indication of something going on internally that's pretty serious. You'll get this when you have bones crushed on the inside, or in this case, a poisoning. She wasn't herself. She was a little bit loopy, but I suspected that there would be a spider bite. So I immediately got her out of the cage, and I went through the entire cage with a fine-tooth comb and was horrified to find an adult black widow hidden deep inside one of the bushes. There were no webs outside in the cage. There was just this big web layer deep inside the bush, and I suspected that that was the problem. Of course, I immediately cleaned out the cage, got rid of the spider, checked for any other possible spiders, and as for Emily, there wasn't much that I could do except totally hydrate her, feed her, make her comfortable, and hope she could make it through. That was a week ago, and luckily she seems to be recovering, which is amazing considering how big that spider was. She has remained blotchy, but her color's been getting better, and at the very least her eyes have been bright and alert throughout this entire process, and so I knew there was a chance that we would both be lucky. And so I'm going to bring you with me as I do my check on her at officially the 1 week point. So there's Emily, and I am so glad to see that she is getting her greens back. Very, very dark, but still there's some greens. Obviously we've got a shed going on, and slowly getting those blue dots back in her side. So the next point is to see how her limbs are working. So we're looking especially for that back right leg. Yeah, she's still favoring it. Still favoring it. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I like how spunky she is and how much she is trying to get away from me. Oop, oop. All right, so we're not 100% yet, but I am hopeful. That is some good action out of someone who was bitten by a black widow spider. Now, what do we do as far as chameleon keepers? Spider webs are going to become more and more of a problem as we do more and more with bioactive. Because with bioactive, we're bringing in plants, we're bringing in branches, we're bringing in leaves. And in all of these, spiders could be hitching a ride. All they have to do is come in as babies, very hard to see, and they can grow and they will thrive in our bioactive environments. And so your job is to be very aware as to what's going on inside the cage. Usually you'll start to see small webs appearing here and there, and you'll have to look in the corners and in places you may not normally look. And I recommend doing this at night. Go in with a flashlight because that's when a number of the spiders come out. And really, being vigilant is the only thing you can do, because spiders are pretty good at finding their way in wherever there are insects, and bioactive environments, lots of food. In my case, Emily is outside, and so there's really no way I'm going to be able to keep baby spiders from getting in. So all I can do is check on a daily basis to see if anything shows up. And now I'm actually wiser and will be checking inside the bushes. And so I hope that you can learn from my experience and keep it from happening to you. Sharing of both our good and bad experiences is what makes our community stronger. So things do look good with Emily, and I have every reason to hope that she will have a full recovery. But obviously, this has been a trying situation. And now it's time for the main event. Dr. Rachel Sue joins us, and she is a well-known exotic pet vet that's on TikTok and Instagram as well as YouTube, and she did a paper on the parasites that are found in captive reptiles. And what she did is she went to a reptile show and she took samples from reptiles that looked healthy and did some analysis on it and found a whole lot of parasites. So this is an interview I was very excited to do, though I can't say I was excited by the results. So let's get into it. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rachel Sue to the Chameleon Academy Chameleon Hour. Welcome, Chameleon Academy. Today we're going to be talking to a very exciting veterinarian in the exotics field, Dr. Rachel Sue. Dr. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We have been following you on Instagram for quite a while, and I say that we follow you with interest because whenever there's somebody who is interested in reptiles or has chameleons at all in the veterinary field, we are very excited to have you.
Well, thank you. I hope to inspire more veterinarians to pursue reptiles and exotics in general. There's not enough of us out there.
What inspired you to get into reptiles as a part of your veterinary interest?
Well, I've always loved exotics. You know, growing up, I had a snake. I had, turtles, frogs. My family just basically had a zoo. We were an animal-loving family. We also had birds and small furry creatures, as well as dogs and cats. So I kind of just grew up loving all of them and not just wanting to work with, the plain dogs and cats. Ended up, working at an aquarium when I was in college. I worked for a wildlife rescue. So, as I went throughout my, undergrad journey, I just developed that love for, exotic pets.
And where do you practice now?
Now I practice in Dallas at a clinic called Summertree Animal and Bird Clinic.
Now, you did a scientific study on parasites. And let's bring this thing up. It's called the Endoparasites of Pet Reptiles and Amphibians from Exotic Pet Shows in Texas, United States. Could you tell us a little bit about what inspired this study?
Yes, so I actually started this research when I was in veterinary school at Texas A&M. We were doing a parasitology lab in our, first year of vet school. We were just running fecal samples, and they told us to bring our own pets' fecal samples to the laboratory. And, I didn't have a dog or a cat, but I had a crested gecko. And, to my surprise, when we ran the fecal, it was actually positive for pinworms. And I thought, that's weird. I didn't expect my captive bred crested gecko to have parasites. And so I was trying to do some more research after that, and I realized there really wasn't much out there. Crested geckos are pretty new in the, reptile community. And so there really wasn't enough research, out there saying, what parasites they had and, were they harmful and so forth. And so I thought, hey, I can do my own research and publish it. And that's pretty much what I did. I, got together with my professors and we made a plan as far as collecting samples. And it led to a, first author publication.
Well, reading this, you collected 283 fecal samples from a show. How did you do that?
So, as a first year, second year, third year veterinary student, I pretty much went to a bunch of reptile shows on, the weekends when I wasn't studying. And I went around asking people for their reptiles' poop. It was a little bit awkward at first. People were kind of suspicious. But, I said, hey, I'm doing this, research, this is free testing for you. And it's, any good breeder would want free testing because it's just, so they have more information about their own pets. And so, I ran the fecal samples and I, let them know if their animals were positive. And then I collected the data. And pretty soon I got to be known as the poop girl at these reptile shows. People would, know me by the third, fourth, or fifth time around. But then there were also some that, after I told them that their reptiles had parasites, they were like, oh no, we don't want you to, test it anymore. Even though all of this was anonymous, I'm not going to go and say who they were. But yeah, there were mixed reactions and some people were extremely thankful. So
in the results you found 87% of the chameleons you tested had a parasitic infection. Do you know how many of these were wild caught and how many were captive bred?
I did not ask that on our, whenever I submitted or collected these samples from the participants, but I have a suspicion that a lot of them were wild caught because based on some of the breeders that I collected samples from, some of them did say they were wild caught. They didn't give me a number, but I do know that there were samples. There's one quote that was kind of interesting. One of the breeders or collectors told me that the chameleon that I collected the poop sample from was freshly imported from, I don't know, Madagascar or something, and he said that reptile's poop was in it when he was still on the plane from Madagascar. I'm like, oh gosh, that's, not what I like to hear, but certainly made for interesting data.
Yeah, on the list of the species that you have, the only ones that are commonly available as captive hatched are the panthers and the veileds, but panthers are still coming in from Madagascar, and both of them can be caught in Florida. So it's kind of hard to tell from the species. But let's go ahead and take a look at the crested geckos, because as far as I know, there are 0 wild-caught crested geckos around. And so, but you had 52 out of 90 specimens had parasites. How do these captive hatched crested geckos end up with parasites?
That's a good question. Now, most of the parasites that we found were pinworms, and pinworms have a direct life cycle. So that means that they don't have to pass through, multiple hosts in order to complete their life cycle and be spread. It was a fecal oral route, which means that the parasite lives in the intestines. It passes its, eggs in the stool, and then another animal, is infected or eats that stool, or something that it eats is infected with that stool and the parasite, and the life cycle continues. Now, with pinworms, I just suspect that people don't have the best. People don't clean their enclosures well, or they cohab their reptiles or their crested geckos, or maybe they, like, if they have a bioactive substrate, then they can survive in the soil or on wood pieces or even on cups. or in the cups that you use. Sorry, the cups that are filled with like Pangea that you use to feed Crested geckos. They can survive on surfaces for a long period of time. So if you don't clean very well, they can easily spread throughout a collection.
Well, let's paint a scenario. Say a number of us chameleon people, we keep our chameleons separate. At least we're supposed to. The chameleons are often in a 4-foot tall cage, and so theoretically, the poop is going to be 3 feet away from the chameleon. And how is it that the parasites that are in the poop would be able to get back up to the chameleon's mouth?
That's a good question. They can carry it on their feet. If they were to poop on a branch and then step in it, then they just spread that throughout the enclosure. If they ever go down to the bottom of their cage, they can certainly bring it up. Because it's only speculation. We don't know exactly how it's spreading, but we know that it is.
Well, we do have crickets that like to jump out of their feeder-run cups.
True.
And run around the bottom of the cage.
That certainly makes sense. I could believe that.
And then there is another connection there. You have our wonderful keepers who clean the bottom of the cage and then are feeding the chameleons. And so I hate to think that we may be a very effective transfer of parasites.
That certainly can do it.
Do you know anything about pinworms as to why those would be the one that is seen the most? Is there anything about pinworms that's different than hookworms or other nematodes?
So pinworms actually aren't that detrimental in low quantities. There's some thought out there that, sometimes they can actually be beneficial to reptiles that, vegetation, they help with digestion, with fiber and so forth. So they're not, I don't want to say they're harmless, because in high quantities or like a very high burden, they can certainly overload the host and cause issues. But the fact that they don't always cause issues is probably why they, one, don't get picked up as often, because a lot of people don't test asymptomatic, reptiles, and two, are able to spread without, if you have a bunch of healthy crested geckos together, it's easier for it to spread than if you said, oh, this one's unhealthy, I'm going to keep it separate. So it probably, if people don't test, then after quarantine, they're not going to really know about it.
Which raises the question, and in the study, you said that a number of the keepers said these animals are healthy, and so they'd be surprised at what you found. In the animals that appear healthy, how serious of a problem is the parasite load?
With the parasites, they are often, they're asymptomatic until something happens that tips them over the edge. So, you can have pinworms be perfectly fine, but let's say they were stressed by, handling or moving during a show, that then they might become sick, or they may be stressed by, a breeding season or so forth. So, it's, possible with any parasite that they are asymptomatic until, something puts them over the edge, especially with reptiles that, they want to be tough. They don't want to, ones that are prey species, they don't want to show any signs of illness, or they would be, picked off by predators. So it's advantageous for them to, not show any signs of illness until they really can't, help it anymore.
What is your feeling as far as whether you should treat or not treat parasites? Say we have a captive bred panther chameleon, and we find it has some pinworms. Is there any thought as to we should treat this no matter what, or is there a point where you say it's not serious?
That's a good question. And, when I'm speaking with my owners after I diagnose parasites, I typically like to give them the pros and cons. Now, with pinworms, they're not always dangerous, and there's some thought that they also might be beneficial in small numbers, so I don't always treat them whenever we pick it up. There's also the risk of treatment. Not all treatment is benign. There's some side effects with antiparasitics. There's risks associated with giving the medication. Some people don't know how to give it properly, and their reptile could aspirate, or there's side effects such as immunosuppression sometimes with these medicines. So they're not completely benign. That's why I probably wouldn't treat if they were a low number. Such as pinworms. If it's something else that's more dangerous, then certainly I would want to treat. As well as if, you have a breeding collection, I might be more inclined to treat there because there's, more opportunity for spreading. If this is someone's pet and there's, no other animal in the collection, then, it's maybe it's worth just waiting and seeing where it goes. One thing to note also, if people have different species of pets, it's also I'd certainly want to treat because there's some parasites that are completely benign in, let's say, turtles, but if a snake were to catch the parasite, it could easily kill them.
And so you're talking about parasites actually jumping between species. Yes. So after going through this study and this experience, what would the conclusion be for us as hobbyists?
I would say as soon as you get a new pet or, an animal that you're breeding, bring it to a vet for an evaluation. Or, learn how to run these tests yourself. It's not extremely hard if you have your own microscope and the right tools. But, I certainly recommend a vet visit still just for an overall physical exam to make sure that the animal's healthy.
Yeah, if, say, we get a panther chameleon or any chameleon, we test them. They are free of parasites. Is it worth it to test them a year later or 2 years later?
Oh, for sure. With parasites, they're not always shedding in the poop. So you might have worms in your intestines, and let's say they're young worms and they're not producing eggs yet. Or, maybe it's just they produce eggs every other week. So they're not always shedding eggs in the stool. So it's possible you could miss them. That's why we test over and over again, because it's not a complete, science. There's some, sensitivity and specificity. You're always going to miss some. Also, if your pets are breeding, if you're introducing them to other reptiles, then there's more chances for them to become infected, which is another reason to test continuously.
Do you plan on doing more tests or more study in the field of parasites?
I may. I had a lot of help whenever I was in veterinary school to get this paper completed. Right now, I just had a baby, so my life's a little bit, my priorities are a little bit shifted now as far as my free time goes. But I might go back into it and do some more research. I do have another paper coming out that I did work on during my last year of veterinary school. It had to do with a parasite that we found in a zoo, actually, in a smart cobra. And it should be coming out next year. It's really cool. It was wild caught, though, but it had lived in captivity for quite a while before the parasite was found.
Well, I noticed that you talked about species, trying to figure out the species of some of these parasites, which I can imagine is incredibly difficult. Mm-hmm. How do you figure out the species of, say, nematodes or Coccidias? Is there some lab tech that is highly trained in something like this?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a, complicated answer. There's certainly different tests you can do. Some of them are, better microscopes, or, catching them at a different life stage where you can differentiate them. But then there's, other tests like PCR or, stuff that I'm certainly not trained in myself. So that would be sending to another laboratory for further testing, which we just didn't have the budget for in our study.
How important is it to know these parasites down to the species level?
For ones such as, pinworms, I would say not as necessary. But for some of the more pathogenic, like amoebas, I would certainly want to know.
What's in? Well, first of all, I did want to talk about the exotic vet community. We know any vet that has experience with reptiles or chameleons is treated as gold within our community. we will pass those names around like they are a treasure. What do you see as the future for exotic vets, and is it growing? Are we going to be seeing more exotic
Well,
vets?
thank you. I really appreciate you saying that because a lot of times we don't feel as appreciated, just because the veterinarian community that's interested in exotics is smaller than dogs and cats. One, it's we don't make as much money as dog and cat medicine because not as many people are willing to spend large amounts of cash on their exotics. And a lot of the exotics are, less expensive, and some people don't have as strong of, I don't want to say they don't have a strong bond, but they're different than dogs and cats. And even some breeders that I have, they it's more of a business to them than it is more of a companion.
Yeah.
So, some people are willing to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on their dogs and cats where, some say there's a limit for their reptile or their, other exotic pet. We see the same thing with, other creatures such as, guinea pigs and rabbits and rats, unfortunately. But that's changing. People are starting to really value their exotic, pet companions. And, people are willing to spend more and more money as, that bond grows. And so, once people, I guess, are willing to put more time and energy into these pets is when we'll probably see more of it as far as veterinarians willing to work with them go. There's also, you have to have a little bit of a passion for it as well, because not everyone loves the scaly creatures, unfortunately. I love them, but a lot of people, including some vets, are scared of snakes. I'd rather see a snake over a horse any day, but that's just me. So I think the community is growing. It might take some time and for us to see a shift, but we certainly are, I think.
How much support is there in veterinary schools to prepare you for exotics?
So that's a good question. I certainly had some opportunities for exotics. I had multiple labs every single year that, they would take us, every single week we'd be learning a new skill with exotics. These were electives, though, that you could sign up for. So, if you were only signed up for them if you were interested. And, we had some clubs that we could be in vet school, which, gave us more opportunities. And then I got a lot of experience during my fourth year of vet school, which I don't know if you know anything about vet school, but the first 3 years are, more, hitting the books and taking classes. And then the fourth year is your rotation. So you're rotating through different aspects of veterinary medicine, such as, radiology, dentistry, surgery, and so forth. And a few of those rotations were exotics for me. Because I tracked exotics in vet school, and I did a lot of my rotations at zoos. So I did someone at the Fort Worth Zoo, the Dallas Zoo, aquarium, and an exotic-only hospital. So you have the opportunity to pursue exotic animal medicine if you're interested in it as a veterinary student. But it's not, required, which is probably why there's so many veterinarians out there that, won't touch any exotics at all.
Do you get any training as far as down to the species level? And the background to that question is we have a number of vets who treat a chameleon like they would a bearded dragon. And so they'll be soaking a veiled chameleon. And then there's not knowing the difference between Jackson's chameleon and a panther chameleon, and saying a Jackson's chameleon should be raise it up to 90 degrees to heal. And we all know the montane chameleons aren't going to like that. And so one of the reasons why we value vets that love reptiles is because we know that so much of what they know, they've had to earn themselves. But what kind of training is available for vets?
So I would say that we didn't have that much or that degree of training as a veterinary student in our in our classes, but you could do that as a rotation. So I worked at a exotic only practice in Dallas whenever I was doing my fourth year rotations, and there I certainly was exposed to the different species on an individual level, and got training there, but it certainly wasn't mandatory, and I kind of had to seek it out. So I think it's mostly up to the individual veterinarian to inform themselves on these variations.
Oh, we are hoping that the reptile community continues to grow to where it becomes worth it for more vets to where vets who are interested in reptiles can actually feed their families with that interest. Mm-hmm. We would like that.
Yes.
What is the best place for people to follow you and what you do in the future?
So I have a couple different social medias. Instagram is where I first started out. Then I went to TikTok and YouTube, and they've all certainly started to grow. And Instagram and TikTok, I'm exotic.pet.vet, and then on YouTube, I'm Dr. Rachel Exotic Pet Vet.
Is the material the same on those three outreaches?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Okay. Obviously I have some longer videos on YouTube though, and limited to shorts on TikTok and Instagram. But there's a little bit of variation.
Is there anything you would like to share with the community to close off with?
I would just say, don't be afraid to go to a veterinarian. Find one that works with reptiles and has a passion for them, and build a strong bond with them. Go do annual physical exams, because that's how you pick up on things. And if you're a veterinary student interested in exotics, feel free to reach out to me, and don't give up on your passion.
Dr. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences and insight on your paper.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel. And if you're viewing here and you're not following her, go to that TikTok and Instagram, exotic.pet.vet, or on YouTube, Dr. Rachel Exotic Pet Vet. She's the kind of vet we love. She loves reptiles, and she has projects like dermestid beetles, cleaning off skeletons, and she shares what she does at work on her social media feeds. Now, more than just a fun social media experience, people like her provide a valuable service to us in the community. I know me, with my outreach right here, I provide a valuable service for those people in the chameleon community. And so if you have a chameleon, I'm going to give you all the information that you need. But what about the people who don't know that they want a chameleon yet? They don't know to come here for information. And by the time they do come here for information, they may sign up with a chameleon already in their hand. So getting them before they know they want a chameleon is crucial. And people like Dr. Rachel do that, because people interested in general exotic animals will be following her account. And so she is able to reach the people we often can't. And so, Dr. Rachel, we love having you as part of the community. And thank you very much for joining us and hanging out for a spell. The Chameleon Academy Chameleon Hour premieres on YouTube every Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. You can, of course, access the shows anytime after that premiere, but the Saturday after the show is released at 8 a.m. in the morning Pacific Time, I hold a live session where you can come, we can interact, you can ask questions about the episode, and we can talk about the topics. And I'd love to see you there. As always, the central hub to all of this information is the website, chameleonacademy.com. Now, if all of this is overwhelming, which, yeah, sometimes it is, just sign up for the newsletter, and every Sunday I send an email out explaining everything that went on through the week. The newsletter sign-up link is in the description. So good chameleoning to you all, and I will see you next Friday for the next episode of the Chameleon Academy Chameleon